Hello, my name is Amin Ali, and I'm just here to report on how the beer game went in terms of my perspective of playing it and the progression of those 50 weeks. So, without further ado, let's get into it. So, here in the contents is essentially what I will be discussing in this report. First will be the overview of the beer game, followed by an analysis of my results, which includes strategies and objectives, main factors that contribute to the bullwhip effect, techniques adopted for mitigating this effect, interpretation of results, as well as future recommendations. And then I'll close off with an analysis of my experience, that being the change in my behavior as I progress throughout the game. So, overview of the beer game. So, what is the beer game? It is essentially a distribution simulation of a beer supply chain, including four makers, that being the retailer, distributor, wholesaler, and factory. Participants chose the role of the retailer with the sole objective of minimizing overall cost for all parties involved. Results of the game show in detail inconsistencies of the supply chain, otherwise known as the bullwhip effect. The purpose of the game is to essentially show us how to educate and understand how the chain works, while also learning how to defeat or reduce the bullwhip effect using a virtual environment in order to do so. Overall viewpoint of the game, I found the game was kind of challenging since I didn't really understand how the algorithm worked when I played it. In turn, I ended up struggling, and my results show that. However, after playing the game, I did notice that had I have taken further time to evaluate other areas, I would have ended up with a way lower score. Other than my results, I did have fun playing the game and trying to figure it out. So, strategies and objectives. The first strategy I had was to buy more supply with the objectives of always having stock available and to ensure that the safety stock was never touched. After further progression, I then had to switch strategies and decrease supply with the objectives of getting rid of the backlog and to also generate more accuracy with customer orders. So, main factors contributing to the bullwhip effect. So, the bullwhip effect is essentially supply chain stating how small reactions at the retail level can cause progressively larger reactions in other sectors. So, the first one I had was excess stock. With the supply chain, it ended up having more stock than anticipated. This was mainly due to the lead time of 2 weeks. Orders were usually in big quantities. However, the problem was that customer orders were smaller than what was being produced by the distribution channels. This in turn contributed to the bullwhip effect because this situation ended up having major repercussions on all other three co-parts, since they have to spend more to produce what the retailer wanted. Overall, the retailer continues to order more, then the other co-parts will go into phases of out of stock while the retailer goes into overstock. Order batching was another one. When orders were put in, they tended to be in large amounts to mitigate the risk of using the safety stock. This ended up being detrimental because it in turn created excess stock. I tended to input orders collectively since the lead time was 2 weeks. Instead, I should have tried to do it on a more daily basis to formulate better results. Now, because of the excess, strategies were changed, so I had to end up ordering less. And so this contributes to the bullwhip effect because when retailers do this, it tends to fluctuate, causing inconsistent demand of orders received by distributors. And then proper lead time evaluation. So I found that lead time was also a determining factor in which led to the cost being high as well as to the bullwhip effect. The lead time was set for 2 weeks, and it was a long time to receive a shipment of orders. With that being the case, it was hard to determine what was going to be needed even when customers were making their orders. This was a main factor contributing to the bullwhip effect because the slower the process is, the longer it takes for orders to be fulfilled, in which creates progressive problems for the other three co-parts. So techniques for mitigating the bullwhip effect. So we said to reduce order size and order more frequently. This can help reverse the bullwhip effect because it allows you to respond to the market's activity with more agility and accuracy, while ensuring that the rest of the supply chain can get these orders done in a reasonable and timely fashion. Not only that, but it decreases backlog. By reducing order sizes, it gets rid of backlog because you're only ordering what you need based on customer demand. By ordering more frequently, it helps provide not only a better balance between the supply chain, but it enhances communication and so that misinterpretation is minimized. Moving forward to clear communication through the supply chain. So sharing information internally between one another. So by doing this, it decreases miscommunication and misordering between departments. This helps mitigate the bullwhip effect because it helps the supply chain assess what it is doing right and wrong in order to incorporate ways to improve all of these aspects. During the game, if we were given the option to communicate with our three co-parts, I believe the results would have been different in all aspects, which shows how essential communicating information between departments is. And then regular communication with customers. This is very important because it ensures that the retailer has accurate and recent forecasts for these customers. This will open up a lot more information, such as inventory, market demand, and even busy times for these customers. This can mitigate the bullwhip effect because it gives insight to important aspects about your customer in order to understand what is needed. All right, so my interpretation of results, I would say that I found that it ended rather poorly. Had I had a better or solid strategy in place, I felt like that would have helped me do a lot better. The lack of planning and execution was very poor on my part as a retailer. Not only that, but the implementation of strategies in which were used was also very poor as well. Overall, I was disappointed with how it turned out, but I did learn a lot from the experience on how supply chains work. I also had more supply than demand. I tended to fluctuate between what I wanted to do. At first, I didn't want to use safety stock, so I ordered more. But after noticing the excess stock, I tried to reduce, but ended up finishing with a high supply and high cost. The good part is that I always had product available. The bad part is the assumption of demand being constant and high um, was not the case. And lastly, other segments were greatly affected. In order to keep up with the number of orders put out, this also required all three co-parts to invest more money and time into producing and delivering these orders. Even when I would order less, it still took more resources to produce them. This is a perfect example of the bullwhip effect. So, future recommendations. So, having a better strategy, planning, and implementation, I think, was the difference between my results. With strategy, I should have tried to incorporate the reevaluation of my inventory. This would have helped me manage my resources more effectively rather than doing collective batch orders. With planning, I should have looked at my work throughout the game and assessed what was working or not instead of trying to figure out the algorithm. Also, assessing my strategies beforehand would have helped a lot too. And I could improve implementation through taking my time and evaluating all aspects such as lead time, safety stock, and so on. Doing this would have increased my chances of success. And then the change in my behavior. In the beginning, I started off by ordering high numbers. This was to ensure that safety stock would not be touched. Moving along, I then decided that a decrease in quantity would be more sufficient based on the orders that were coming in. Then I noticed the excess supply of beer, which did not meet expectations or assumptions of customer demand. This caused my behavior to change because now I'm in between roles of backlogging and not, and I was very stressed throughout this process. And due to this, I stuck with the strategy of doing the low supply, and in the end, it did not work. So I ended up having a huge excess of beer, which in turn caused all core parts to generate a large amount of capital used to generate this production. When going through the change, it ended up being obsolete because it happened around the halfway mark, and based on customer demand, there wasn't much that could be done to get rid of this excess. My behavior at the end was a bit disappointed as I was not fully able to achieve my goal of having a low cost. And here's just the appendixes here stating my results. However, thank you for listening to my report and my presentation. I hope you learned a lot from my experience as I did. Thank you and have a very good day.